Hi everybody, apologies. It seems that for some technical reason, our session didn't start properly this morning. So we have been talking away to you for the last 10 minutes and hadn't realised that it wasn't operating properly. So thank you for getting in touch and letting us know. That's been really helpful. Hopefully you can now all hear us and you can see myself and Gemma. So could you just pop a message on for me, any of you that have already told me that it's not working, to let me know that you're there. I've got a message saying that you can see me. Can you also hear me? That would be really helpful if you could let me know. Apologies. We have been talking away, giving you really helpful advice while you couldn't hear us. So apologies. We will start again. Thank you very much for letting me know. I really appreciate that. So let's start again. Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to see you all here. And thank you so much for your patience. We have had a few technical difficulties this morning. So we are glad now to be here and live. So thank you for all of you that jumped on and let us know. That's really appreciated. So this morning we are going to be joined by Gemma Duxbury from our Governance, Procurement and Information team. And I'm hoping that some of our other colleagues will be able to join us. But as I say, unfortunately, this morning we seem to have had a plethora of technical difficulties. But we will keep going. So this morning we're going to go through some of the questions that we've been asked in advance. Obviously, if you've got any questions as we go through, please do feel free to pop those onto the Q&A and we'll try and answer those as best we can in real time. After the event, we, for those of you that haven't attended before, will send out a written Q&A response with some details on that. So if you want to have a look at that, or if you have any colleagues who couldn't attend, you can obviously share that with them. So just to reiterate, I'm Ruth Rawmullen. I am the head of public sector employment, which includes our education team. I've got with me this morning Gemma Duxbury, who's partner in our Governance, Procurement and Information team. Hopefully you can all see Gemma. Gemma is currently away at a conference, the Sixth Form Colleges Conference, and has managed to join us remotely. So hopefully you can see her. If not, please do let me know. The Q&A is there for us to have some communications. Do let us know. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your patience this morning. So the first question that we had was around employment law. So I will take that. It's quite a detailed question. So I will read out the question. It's quite a long one. So we have teaching staff who voluntarily do lunchtime supervisor duties. Historically, we have an arrangement where we pay them a set fee and we give them a free lunch for this. I'm keen to understand if legally we are able to continue doing this as an extra payment via their teaching contract, or if we should put them onto an additional secondary support staff contracts and pay rate. We do have some support staff who also do this, and we just put it through as an additional payment of a set amount. It seems a lot of admin to do to run secondary contracts, and especially with them all being on LGPS pensions. So we will take that and I'll break it up. Gemma, I've got colleagues telling me that they can't see you. You might need to just press the webinar button at the bottom because there's been a technical fault. It's not taking you through. So if you could, that would be really helpful. And then everybody should hopefully be able to see you. Thank you for letting me know that you couldn't see Gemma. I appreciate that. Okay, so the question, I'm going to break it down into a few parts because it's a difficult question to answer with technical accuracy without having seen the contracts, without looking at the payments and looking what's been happening historically. But there are some very key generic points here that will be important in this instance and also in any other instances. So the first thing to note is that when you have a new employee or an employee who changes their contract or their pay or their terms, you do need to issue a new contract or an updated contract. Now, there's a requirement in the Employment Rights Act for this. And what tends to happen is if somebody brings a claim, and it may not be for the thing that you're thinking it is, they can then bring an additional part of that claim for the failure to provide that contract. And the resultant effect is up to 4 weeks pay in respect of compensation for failure to provide that contract. So as you can see straight away, there is quite a significant price to pay for something which can be quite easily dealt with. So I appreciate it's burdensome, but unfortunately that then means that you don't, you will avoid those sorts of claims. So I think the cost probably of the risk of those sorts of claims possibly outweigh the benefits. However, what I would say is this: we all know that in the Standard Teachers Terms and Conditions of Pay document that the teachers cannot be required to do the lunchtime supervisor duties. So the good point here is people are doing that voluntarily, and that's great. But what we then need to do is look at the fee and determine, and I suspect this won't be an issue here, but we need to determine that it doesn't take us below national minimum wage. Now, I would suspect, given the levels of pay, it probably doesn't, but it's something that just needs to be borne in mind. In addition, the free lunch issue can have an impact if that, were to reduce that pay below national minimum wage because the free lunch is given as effectively a part payment. That can also become an issue. Again, I'm not convinced it'll be an issue here, but it's just worth mentioning. And aside to that, of course, as well, is if we're providing free things to staff, sometimes there can be a tax implication in terms of benefits in kind. Again, I'm not a tax advisor, so I can't give specific advice on that, but it is something just to flag up, something to look at. The most sensible thing to do would be to put them on additional contracts. You've then got clarity about what's happening, what the pay is, what the terms of that are. And then the LGPS question is slightly more tricky, but there is a good argument that they will have to be treated as pensionable service as well. We need to look at this more specifically. So what I would say is, hopefully those generic points will help people to understand some of the things that might be affecting their schools. For the person this question came from, if you want to look at this, it looks like you've been doing it historically as well. If you're going to change things, it may need some careful handling because there may be some additional payments or additional risks involved. So what I would say is do seek advice. Obviously, if you need to talk to us, please do come to us offline and we can help to take that forward. Hopefully that covers that question. It's quite a long one, as I say, but if you do have any questions, again, as we go through, please do feel free to drop a line on the Q&A to us. I'm going to go to Catherine Kennedy, who I am really excited has managed to join us. We've had all kinds of technical difficulties this morning, Catherine, so thank you for managing to get here. We have had a question in advance, and Catherine is what I like to refer to as our property guru in education. She's certainly my go-to when I have some issues. So the question, Catherine, seems to be quite a generic one, but hopefully you'll be able to provide some advice. And that is, please can I ask about building regulations, and is all work in schools subjected to approval?
Okay, I'm hoping you can hear me, Ruth, first of all. Good. That's
yes, loud and clear.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, so that is quite a generic question. I think the answer to the specific question is yes. Building works carried out in any school need to be in line with building regulations. I think in general terms, it's fair to say that building regulations, there's less of them than there used to be. and they're probably less prescriptive than they used to be. So it gives schools a little bit more flexibility. The general wording that underlies a lot of them is, are the alterations that are being done suitable? And there isn't a specific definition of what is suitable. So you would be looking at such things like the size of the school, the number of pupils, sex, any special needs they might have, in considering what is suitable and appropriate. And that's the sort of process that you need to go through to meet these regulations at the moment. And those regulations would apply to all types of schools, so includes nurseries and alternative provision. So the other sort of major thing that's happened lately with regulations is that they've been updated to help with the carbon zero target that the government's put in place. So trying to get new buildings to be net carbon effective by 2050. So most of that's been on new builds, but you have to be a little bit careful because it does also apply to existing buildings, and it applies to all projects from the 15th of June 2023, so this month. Most of what's been introduced now are interim measures on the way to the government's future homes and building standards, which is the full detail of which is expected from 2025. But a key part of that is that all new buildings are capable of being net zero. But in terms of existing schools, it can have effects on what you need to take into account. We know that 40%, for example, of all power expended in this country and carbon emissions is to do with heating. So a lot of this stuff is very much focused on reducing the amount of heating you might have to use. So in future, they'll be looking at, in more detail at thermal efficiency of glass and stuff like that. So there is useful guidance generally on the sort of things you'd need to consider on any specific building project on the dove.uk website under the heading of this building regulation to be taken into account on school and higher education buildings. But yeah, if there's anything more specific, by all means do send it through and I can come back to you offline on that.
Thanks, Catherine. That's really helpful. I'm going to hopefully, well, I was going to move to Gemma, but she appears to have disappeared. I suspect her signal has gone. I did want to introduce you to my colleague Nicola Dawn, but unfortunately Nicola I don't think can manage to get on screen at the moment, but I wonder if Nicola is able. Oh, she is able.
I'm here, Ruth. I'm here, just in the nick of time, as ever.
Perfect.
I'm so sorry. We've had connection problems in the Manchester office, but I'm here now for the important bit.
Perfect. So just to introduce Nicola, Nicola is a partner in our insurance team, and Nicola specialises in occupational disease. And Nicola and I were just chatting yesterday about the importance of us. We don't know what we don't know. So Nicola, I don't know whether you want to, I haven't got a specific question for you, but I wonder if you want to just explain to everybody some of the key things that have been on your radar with schools and in the education sector in the last few months.
Absolutely, yes. Thanks very much for that, Ruth. Yeah, there's quite a few things on at the minute which might be on a school's radar. The one you all initially probably going to be familiar with is any asbestos claims for any asbestos that had been installed sort of in the 1960s, 1970s around school, where claims may start to come in for mesothelioma or asbestosis or pleural thickening. As ever, if what you need to be doing with that is looking to keep any asbestos registers. We can help with that as well with tracking down insurance history for you, and looking into a claim and looking into the validity of it. We've actually challenged quite a few schools' claims for different councils by having a look at the nature of the asbestos that's in the building and whether that would actually go over the thresholds needed to claim. So we can deal with any asbestos related queries for you. Another big one we've had at the moment recently is things coming out of COVID. So obviously teachers and school staff will have been key workers during the pandemic. We're starting to see a few inquiries from claimant solicitors around potentially COVID may well become a prescribed industrial disease later this year or early next year, about potential claims coming in for that. So what we'll be looking at around there is documentation relating to PPE, working from home, all of that sort of thing. And leading on from that, through COVID and non-COVID related, is the personal injury element of stress at work claims brought through the civil courts, which are very document heavy claims, but we can assist you with that in helping you to go through any documentation, any risk assessments, looking at any potential claims or claims that have come in from a defendant perspective. So also we can get involved early on, and if you've got any idea that any claims that those sorts of things are going to come up, we're more than happy to help and guide you through the process. So that's a couple of things that might come. We also do some other weird and wonderful things. So if you've got anybody who's claiming for a bad back through repetitive strain or carpal tunnel syndrome through repetitive typing, anything like that, we can also advise on what you need to be keeping document and witness evidence wise.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nicola. It is interesting, isn't it? I always, you know, when we talk to schools, often it's all about, you know, there's a lot of things in schools to be on top of, isn't there? Lots of different requirements and legal things. So I think it's really important sometimes to just share our experiences of things that are going on, because actually that's the thing that can lead people to think, oh, that's happening in my school, or that's something that we've come across. And I think, you know, as a group, we're quite open to being that sounding board. So if those things are there, we run these sessions monthly during term time. We are planning for this one today to be our last session until September, because we know as you get into the beginning of July, it becomes a little bit silly season. Everything gets really, really busy at schools. So we are planning on making today our last one until September. But, you know, if you do have questions offline that you want to ask us, you can email us or contact us. Most of our mobile numbers are actually on our website, so you can actually get in touch with us offline as well. And also for those of you in schools that I know will be working in the summer, hiding away, getting tons of work done before the new terms start. So thanks, Nicola, for joining us and for doing that this morning. The next question is another employment question. So this is, we employ a contract cleaning company, but are looking to employ our own cleaners direct. We do know that 2 people need to be followed and have registered for a local authority course to look at the ins and outs. What would be our first step with regard to approaching the cleaning company? Are there any major pitfalls to be mindful of? The answer to that is yes. It is going to depend on what type of school you are. If you are a local authority school where the local authority is the employer, it won't simply be your decision, because the staff are technically in that situation employed by the local authority. So you may need local authority input. If you are not a maintained school and on the employer, and it comes down to who the actual employer is, and that is different depending on all the different types of schools as to what your role in that process will be. So I think that is the first potential major pitfall. Sometimes we see that schools are trying to engage new providers, change over and get people to work in-house and those sorts of things, or get you know, send cleaners from that are employed out. So in both circumstances, it's very important to establish who the employer is before you start, because if you're not the employer, you ultimately can't do it. So you will need to get involved with the local authority if that's the situation you're in. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that if you are going through a process of TUPE, you are looking to get rid of that contract, you'll probably need Gemma's team. Make sure that you terminate the contract properly in accordance with the provisions. Sometimes there can be lengthy termination provisions, so you will need to get some input on that, and then you will need to plan for what you're going to do. You will, if you are terminating that contract, potentially end up with the same cleaners anyway, because if they only work, for example, for your school, then, or do the majority of the work for your school, they're likely to transfer over to you. So if the problem is you don't think the cleaners are very good, you could end up with the same cleaners. So it's important to understand all of that. So I think the reality is you need to look at it in the round. It isn't just a TUPE issue. It can be a contractual issue as well. It can have implications for employment, and it can also have various financial implications, which I'm sure you've probably already considered. But I think the first things to consider are the financials. I think it's the contractual requirements, but the first thing to start with is who is the legal employer and who can actually put this into effect. Is it you or is it local authority? Because that will be your first hurdle. Too many times we've been partway through looking into TUPE and discovered that actually the school can't do it because they've got to have the local authority's permission and agreement, or it may be the local authority that have to do it. So you do need to tread carefully and make sure that you've answered those questions before you go anywhere near terminating contracts and that sort of thing. Hopefully that's given you a bit of a flavour to start with on that one. And oh, we've opened the gates for TUPE. So we now have 2 more questions about TUPE. So it's going to be a TUPE day. Okay, so if staff transfer on a TUPE to a contract caterer, can they at a later date change the contract T&Cs? Is TUPE time limited? Basic answer, no. TUPE is not time limited. However, the further away you get from the time of the TUPE transfer, it becomes easier. And there are certain rules about certain changes that can be affected. So if they are a positive change, they can be affected in a more timely manner. But there are various processes you would need to go through, process of consultation, and it depends on the change of what those terms and conditions are. So for example, if you're changing pay, which I would hope you're not changing pay because that's the really tricky one, you know, you need to go into a consultation process, you need to plan that, you need to manage that process carefully. So basic answer, short answer, no, it isn't time limited. But as it goes, you know, further away from the TUPE, it does become easier. And there are certain circumstances in which you can change contracts. Third one, if we took back contract catering in-house and the staff are a mixture of previous school staff and new staff, how would pension work as the newer staff are on an employer scheme that is not LGPS and we can only operate teachers' pension and LGPS, but this would be an increased cost? Okay, that's a tricky question. So if you would have to look at what pensions you've got in place, you would have to look at what that looks like. It may be that we have to look at dealing with the pension obligation. The difficulty is that pension liabilities on TUPE are more complex, and again, it depends what type of school you are, and in the public sector there are public sector regulations that also influence how we have to look at pension, and that we will do our best to kind of try and maintain things. The TUPE regulations are quite specific around pensions, and a lot depends on what the current position is as to whether or not you've got the LGPS status. Some people who don't have it have to apply for it. It sounds in this case like you have it, and you're saying that you can only operate the 2, but there be an increased cost. That is something that you would have to factor into your commercial decision making as to whether or not you take the contract catering back in-house. It is certainly something you would need to factor in to your cost model as to whether or not there's a commercial benefit to doing what you want to do. Because if they are the only pension schemes that you operate, that is going to have an additional cost. And I don't think there's any significant way around that. Now, it might be that you're going to save costs by bringing it back in. It may be that there's economies of scale to be made. That is really going to be a bit of a financial case, business decision as to whether or not you do that and what the costs of that are. I would say, you know, if you are going to get into these sorts of things and these sorts of negotiations, you know, other firms are available, but of course, you know, at Forbes, we do these things on quite a regular basis. And as you can see, from the breadth of knowledge in the team, we've got people that can advise across the board. So again, in this situation, you know, Gemma's team will get involved in dealing with bringing the contracts to an end, looking at how that works. We can look at the commercial business case with you as well. That is something that we would do, but it is something that needs to be factored in. And I'm glad that you've thought of it, because it's good to know you've thought of that in advance, and it is something that you can then problem solve. If you haven't thought of it, it creeps up on you partway through dealing with the transfer. It can actually be the thing that makes the difference about whether you transfer them or not. So it's a good thing that you've thought of it already. So enough from me. I'm going to go back to Gemma, who did a beautiful section on subject access requests when nobody could hear or see us. So I'm going to ask Gemma to go back and just try and repeat what she talked about. And this was to do with Gemma and I have been involved in a few cases in the last few months where when there is a claim in play, that we tend to then see lots of subject access requests as a way of getting round disclosure or getting early disclosure of things. And I just wanted Gemma to talk to you about what we've seen with that. Gemma, over to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hurrah. So firstly, apologies.
I said yes, and then you went. I said yes, and then you went all wobbly on us. Yes. No, unfortunately, I think we've lost Gemma's sound.
I'm actually sat in a corridor. Do apologize. Are you joking? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
No,
Can you
Gemma,
hear
you've gone.
me?
Yeah, no, Gemma, I think you're going to need to leave because you've gone, your bandwidth has gone, I think. Right, well, in that case, what we'll do is we will, we'll get back to Gemma if we can, but in the meantime, I was going to also introduce you to Louise Goss, who has joined us this morning. Unfortunately, you're not able to see Louise, so please don't panic. None of us can see her at the moment. Again, we've had some technical problems with the cameras on the Zoom this morning. Louise works in our insurance team, similar to Dawn, but doing different things, working with Keller Bowers, who you will have seen on previous education sessions. And Louise was just going to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that they're assisting with in the education sector for schools and education authorities. Louise, over to you.
Thanks, Ruth. Yes, so I work primarily within the social care team, but we also have quite a large education offering in terms of any claims arising within schools or higher education provisions or special educational needs provisions across the board, really. We work with head teachers and business managers to we offer training to supplement their knowledge and boost the confidence of those holding management responsibilities within such settings. We can deal with all sorts of claims arising within schools, colleges, in terms of general slips, trips and falls, claims arising from school outdoor activity trips, both domestic and abroad. Any safeguarding concerns that might occur, and then following that, any child protection responsibilities, including when to refer to other agencies such as social care teams or educational welfare, that kind of thing. Of course, we deal with historic abuse matters, and we can also assist with any inquests. So, you know, if the worst happens and staff are required to give witness statements, they have to give evidence at trial in a health and safety trial or at an inquest, then we can be there to support you and assist you through that as well, because we do appreciate the very stressful times for head teachers and executives within these organisations. So that is something that we can assist you with.
Thanks, Louise. Thanks, Louise. It's really good that you've been able to join us this morning. Gemma is back. Gemma, do you want to try and see if we can hear you?
I've reverted to my phone. Is that working?
Yes. Yeah, we can see you and hear you loud and clear.
God for that. I tell you what, I have.
Oh, gone again. Yeah, I think, Gemma, we're going to have to give it up because we've lost you again. Okay, unfortunately, I think we've lost Gemma. At least we know that she's tried while she's away at conference this morning. So we don't normally have as many problems technically as we've had this morning, so I'm going to be open about that and say apologies for that this morning. But hopefully so far you've found the session useful for the things that you wanted to ask. I don't have any more questions that have come through. If you do have any more questions, please do pop them on the Q&A, and we will answer those as we go. As I've said it, another question has popped up, so thank you for that. Has anybody got experience of removing TLRs from staffing structure or as staff leave? Certainly we've seen that happening in quite a few education providers over the last couple of years, that it's been removing some TLRs. It does depend which TLR it is, and there are processes that you will need to go through to manage that quite carefully. But again, the fact that you're asking the question now is a really good sign, because it tells me that you're perhaps in the early stages of planning this. It's more of a thought process at the moment. I think there probably will be colleagues from our schools online who have gone through that process. But again, what I would say is, even if you're at early stages of planning, this comes back to when Nicola and I started earlier about you sometimes don't know what you don't know. You know, do talk to people, and certainly at FUBS, we encourage early contact to, you know, get out in front of the issues that might come or things that you're thinking of doing, to effectively kick the tires. Make sure that the thing that you want to do is workable. We've already talked this morning about assessing the sort of commercial business case for doing the thing you want to do, and actually, if you've factored all the aspects in, does it still make commercial sense to do that? Does it work for your school? Is it something you simply need to do? Is there another reason that you're doing it? Sometimes we do certain things because, for example, somebody isn't performing properly, and we try and go around it, and actually what we should be doing is managing that performance. So I would say, you know, test your theory. Why is it you want to do it? What is it going to achieve? What's the business case for it? Does that business case stack up? And then put the plan in place to enact what you need to do and how you need to do it. It may be sometimes you can't have an answer that says, yes, we can do it now, but it may be, you know, as you say, as staff leave and you don't replace them, that may be an option. But it depends how many TLRs you've got, how many staff you've got, what the likelihood of those people moving on is, or whether it's something that is a bit of a dire business case, whether there's a need for just a restructure or a rethink of how you're doing things. You know, things do change. So it's really good that you're thinking ahead of that. And I would say, do think ahead of that. People often think we can only talk to the lawyers once it's gone wrong. That's simply not true. And the purpose of this education Q&A is to say, look, come talk to us, get some ideas, you know, discuss things that you want to do. No idea is ever a silly idea. You know, they've all got merit. So it's about making sure we can do what we want to do. And certainly I know from all the colleagues that are here today and colleagues that aren't here today, you know, we all want to support that. We are, you know, keen in the education sector to make sure that we are supporting you, and we want to be trusted advisors. So, you know, do feel free to use these sessions to talk to us. If you need to reach out offline, our mobile numbers, emails are out there. Do feel free to get in touch with us. It isn't as you expect that we hit the clock running and start charging you the second you pick up the phone. We want to be able to see if we can support, and if you need advice, we can tell you what that advice looks like and let you see what you need to do. So hopefully that helps. The other thing we can do on occasion, with agreement from other people in the sector, is if we know somebody's been through something similar to you, we can always, with your agreement and their agreement, put you in touch to talk to one another. That's really important, to draw on the expertise as well from your colleagues in the sector. I'm looking at the Q&As. I'm not seeing many more coming through. We've got a couple of minutes left, so if you do have any other questions for any of our panel of experts this morning, please do pop them on the Q&A. As I said earlier, after today, we're going to take a break until we return in the new academic year. I'm expecting that will be around September time, but please don't feel like you have to save your questions till then. If you do have questions, if you need any support over the summer, do get in touch. We'll all be working as well. We know you'll all be there working hard in the background, so please do feel free. You can get in touch. Oh, Nicola, somebody wants your details. Yes, we can do that. I think we will have your email address. We can email you after the session to provide you with those details.
Oh, thanks, Ruth. As I say, very happy to just have a chat. If anybody's got any worries or concerns or anything they want to look at from a disease perspective, and it's quite wide ranging, I'm around any time and my mobile number's available. So I look forward to speaking to you.
Yeah. Could the lady who's asked that question just pop on the Q&A for me the name of your school, and we will track you down. And that would be very helpful, rather than we try to just put, mind you, I can probably put Nicola's email address in here for you. I will see if I can do that. So just bear with me. Yeah, no, I can't do it on here. I can't reply to you on here. If you could just pop the name of your school on the Q&A for me, because I obviously don't want to read your name out, that would be very helpful. And then Nicola will drop you an email, get in touch after the session. Thank you for that. Another question has popped through. Brilliant, thank you. I've got the name of the school there now, so I will connect you up after the session. Thank you. And then one more question has come through, which is it courtesy to interview an internal candidate when they are not qualified to do the role advertised? I would say no. What you've got to be very clear on here is, what is the job that's advertised? What is the job specification? And does that person meet job specification requirements? If they don't, and there's no equivalence, so sometimes we look at different qualifications and that sort of thing, or you might take some experience over a qualification or vice versa. If they don't meet the specification, then I don't think you should have a courtesy, because you are raising the expectation of that employee that they might then be successful in that role. I think what that needs is a conversation to discuss why they're not reaching the interview stage and why they didn't meet the specification. So I hope that helps. And I know that can be difficult when you have to work with people, but I think it is important to have clear and honest conversations. One of the biggest problems we see in employment law is communication. People trying to do the right thing or do the well-intentioned thing, and that is often when it goes wrong. So my view is a clear and honest conversation is far more important, and you know, I would hope that that person will take that as, you know, as it's intended, but if they don't, you've done the right thing as well. You know, it's very important, and it's really important, I know, in schools at the moment, that we have to have the right candidate for the right job. You know, it's more important than ever with the hours people have to work and the support that's needed. So I think, you know, an honest conversation, I think, is more important in that situation than feeling like it's a courtesy. So hopefully that will help. Okay, well, thank you so much to all my colleagues and fellow panelists this morning. And it's been a really enjoyable session for us. I do apologise for the technical difficulties at the beginning, but it's been very interactive. We've had lots of really interesting questions this morning. So thank you to all of you for attending and for being interactive and also being very patient this morning. If anybody does need any support offline, please do feel free to get in contact with us, and we look forward to seeing you all hopefully refreshed in September. Thank you for supporting us this year. We hope to see you all again next year. May we wish you hopefully some kind of restful break over the summer. I know not all of you will get one, but we hope you get a restful summer, and we look forward to seeing you next year. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.